Let's talk about audit strategy. We want to make sure we have a solid audit strategy when we are planning, developing our scope, and the timing of an audit. These are going to outline our general strategy terms and what are we going to have on our checklist. We have a checklist for our audit strategy as a part of our audit plan, and these are concrete things that we should have figured out ASAP. Deadlines, right? Figuring out those deadlines, making sure when everything's going to get done, taking into account regulatory deadlines from, let's say, the SEC or the PCAOB, AICPA. Also, internal deadlines to make sure we just get the project done in time. Preliminary evaluation of materiality. Another one, make sure that's documented. Now, materiality may change throughout the audit, but we want to have a preliminary evaluation of materiality. Also, whether or not the audit will utilize specialists, service organizations, or the client's internal team. Who are we going to work with? Who are we going to rely upon for some extra work? That's pretty important because you want to let them know right away, hey, you're going to be helping me out with this. How about any areas that have a higher risk of material misstatement? Yeah, I mean, we've talked about that before. It's going to be revenue, cash, liabilities. Want to make sure we consider those. And lastly, any regulatory reporting requirements that the client must abide by. Again, if they need to publish some sort of documentation per the FDA or per the PCAOB, something like that. SEC might require particular items. Banking's got a lot of regulations, so making sure that they're complying with the Department of the Treasury, anyone they need to work with. Here are some more matters to consider when accepting or planning an engagement. Now, these are matters not to consider when accepting or planning an engagement. We don't want to worry about the predecessor auditor, so that's the person who audited the client last year, if there was someone different who did that last year. We don't want to worry about their understanding of our opinion on the current year financial statements. These are pulled from multiple choice questions, so if they seem maybe like, why is that important, or why are you even talking about that? That's the reason why. We don't want to worry about their ability to increase profitability year to year. That's a financial analyst's role. Our job is to make sure that the numbers are accurately reported. We're not going to worry about the years of experience of the auditor who audited their financial statements last year. Again, might seem kind of random, but those are some items that you might see in multiple choice questions. Next, what matters to consider prior to accepting an engagement, and then we've got matters after accepting an engagement. Before accepting an engagement, we want to consider communication between the predecessor auditor and those charged with governance. Did the predecessor auditor leave on bad terms? Is there a reason for that? I don't know, but we should figure that out. Any prior situations which would provide indication of management's integrity. We don't want to continue or work with management that lacks integrity. That would not be very good. These are some factors to consider after accepting an engagement as part of planning the audit. What about the successor's review of the predecessor's prior year documentation? We want to review the prior year documentation. We can't just pick up from scratch and look at anything that was done last year. No, we need to be allowed to look at that documentation and make sure that we agree with it and that it makes sense. We also want to coordinate with the client's internal audit department. That can happen after we accept the engagement. Now, this is something that would be agreed upon before the engagement. You would agree with management, hey, we're going to work with your internal audit department. Management would have to make sure that that's going to happen, right? That would have been agreed upon prior, but doing the actual coordinating with them happens, it can happen after we accept the engagement. We also want to determine the risk of material misstatement. That's going to tie into audit risk. We'll talk about that a lot there. We also want to understand the client's methods in gathering and processing information. They do that. And lastly, recent trends in the client's industry. I understand there's definitely a lot of overlap in what we're going through here, but if there's overlap and there's something that you've seen 2 or 3 times, such as understanding trends in the client's industry, that's important. Just another note as well, it's very important when you're reading any multiple choice question or sim, understand what type of engagement you're in and what stage of the engagement you're in. For example, you know that you should understand recent trends in the client's industry. But if a multiple choice question says, what is something you should do in an audit engagement during the conclusion stage? Well, this is not something that you would do. In the conclusion stage, this would be during planning. Just a side note there, something to look out for when you're doing some questions. The audit plan. Once the overall audit strategy has been established, we're going to have this concrete written out plan going to be developed to address the various matters identified in the overall audit strategy. It's going to take into account the need to achieve the audit objectives through efficient use of the auditor's resources. This is how we're going to get it done. You want concrete, objective. This is how we're going to do what we're going to do. We want to plan out the establishment of the overall audit strategy and the detailed audit plan. These are not necessarily discrete or sequential processes, but closely interrelated, since changes in one may result in consequential changes to another. The overall audit strategy and the detailed audit plan, this is kind of like your overall mission. This is the how you're going to do it. Lastly, therefore, it's not necessarily the case that the audit strategy is prepared and completed before the plan is devised, and in practice, it's typical for the two to be developed together.
Hey there! Are you ready to not only pass your CPA exams, but truly understand and enjoy the material while studying? I know it seems impossible, right? Especially to enjoy the material? We'll do it together. Tap into the power of CPA.examprep.ai, where we've got personalized quizzes, multiple choice questions, memorization guides, flashcards, simulations, all tailored to your learning. Our adaptive study planning puts you on the fastest path to success and lifts you back up if you fall behind. Avoid wasting your precious time and money attempting an exam with a low chance of passing, because who wants that? We want to get you through this process as quick as possible. Our exam readiness prediction lets you walk in with confidence, knowing that you're prepared for success on exam day. Thankfully, there's no payment method needed to get started, so why don't you come join us? Visit cpa.examprep.ai and let's achieve your exam success together.